evening. I have been asked to, well, I suppose I should say summoned, yes. I've been summoned to say a few words about the theme for our concert tonight, and that is, as you can see on your brochure, what does it mean to be an artist in our modern age? And I have to admit, I do not like speaking in public that much, not because I'm naturally shy or anything like that, but because I do not easily think in words, because words are not my medium, you see. Music is. I always found reading music easier than reading books, for example, which is why I would prefer to tackle this question from the standpoint of the composer. So I would like to rephrase this question into what does it mean to be a composer in our modern age? And I hope that what I shall say will be applicable to other arts as well. Composers these days, well, at least in my days, and that wasn't long ago because I only died 40 years ago, yes, the modern composer, well, he doesn't usually have the church or the court or the theatre to work for regularly, right? I mean, these institutions still exist, we're aware of them, but for the modern composers, they may obtain commissions from these institutions, but commissions are occasional, not regular. Right? I had just entered high school, and one of my teachers asked me, well, what are you going to do when you grow up, and what kind of job are you aiming for? And I said to him, because I was convinced already, well, I am going to be a composer. But I don't think he was satisfied by my answer, because his response was, yes, but what else? When I was 19, I found myself in the job market, and I got work writing music for films. That was my very first job, and it was a very good lesson. I had to write to order, just like the Mozart, Haydn, and Bach, and people like that. I had to master that kind of technique. But most of what I was writing was sound effects, so imitations of nature sound. Because there are times when the composer himself has a vision, right? Just like the theatre directors, the film directors do, and want to express that vision in the medium of music. Because music, right, has the capacity to communicate ideas and visions and thoughts. It's just that in these film music and soundtracks and these things, they don't use music in this sense, right? Just accompaniments to other things going on. It is at these moments when the musician, the composer, wants to express something through music. This is a time when they compose things like symphonies, sonatas, and suites. Right? Again, I referred to them earlier as abstract music, and those are the very kind of works that we'll hear soon. I met the Russian cellist Rostropovich, who you may know about, through my friend Dmitry Shostakovich, who also you may know about. He's a famous Russian composer. I was at the premiere of Shostakovich's first cello concerto, and I was able to see Rostropovich perform. I had never seen him until then. I was just so impressed by his way of performing. And then afterwards, he came up to me and said, "Mr. Britten, I would really like it if you could compose a piece for me." And I'm willing to commission it, of course. And I said to him, "Well, I have to politely decline your offer, but I do have a counter offer. I will write you a piece for the cello if it is a cello sonata, right? So that I, because I could play the piano, could accompany you. I could play it with you." Suite was composed when I was just 21. So one of the things about the modern age that is very relevant to the young composer is this new development in mass communication. When I was growing up, the radio was becoming a much bigger force, not just used by the military, but also used in our homes, right? Especially during the 20s, it became much more of a big thing. And during the 50s, television replaced the radio as a major home entertainment medium. And both radio and television are mass communication, modes of mass communication. I was very aware of this opinion, very vocal opinions about how music should be written. And this came in the form of writing music for the masses, truly proletarian music. And there was a lot of pressure for people to do this, to make music engagé, as they called it, relevant to political purposes. And there was also a very vocal opinion coming from a different direction about how art should be more avant-garde, how we should get rid of the old forms of classical music and write things that may shock audiences at first, but are necessary developments to bring fresh air into the genre and things like this. But these kind of opinions, although they may have started in the closed doors of a salon or a drawing room, by means of mass communication were amplified so much that it was very hard for composers to ignore this opinion and had to respond to it. But if for the young composer, right, this was not a very favorable situation because unless you have a very clear sense of what kind of music you want to write, unless you know what you stand for, your aesthetic convictions and things like this, it is very easy for you to be frightened into conforming to these fashions. And luckily, when I was writing this violin suite, I had already began to become aware of who I was, what I stood for, my aesthetic convictions. I was listening to these avant-garde music that people all talking about, and certainly I found things that were interesting. But rather than conforming to the fashion and trying to imitate those styles, what I did was rather to assimilate them, right? So I had my own purpose. I had my own vision of what I wanted from my pieces, and if it so happens that these fashionable pieces have little things in them that seem useful to me, well, yes, I will take them, and I think that is completely legitimate. There's still the question of, well, okay, so I can make unique works, but they're just a drop in the ocean, right? There's so much music around. How can my music be something that makes an impact? And moreover, how can it be remembered? How can it be how can it be treated as part of the tradition that I'm writing for? You may notice that you may have noticed that there aren't many cello suites out there. So the Bach cello suites are very, very famous, right? Everyone knows about them. But when you ask people to list other cello suites, they don't really know. I mean, other people, and I think that the reason is because Bach has this immense presence, right, in the tradition, and the cello suite form is associated with him. And so anyone who tries to write a cello suite is that itself is a very daring gesture, because then you are trying to compete with that, right? But that is exactly what I did. Other composers have tried. Bloch and Reger, I don't know if you know about them, they also wrote cello suites. But if you listen to their works, I mean, they're not performed often, and I think one of the reasons is because their works are trying so hard to acknowledge this figure of Bach. The question is, well, how can I write a cello suite that can stand on its own, acknowledge Bach, and yet not be overwhelmed by him? And I think that's part of the reason that, unlike Bloch or Reger, I did not include any of these movements that are familiar from Bach's cello suites. So, Fuga Lamentos, Serenata Marcia, Cordone, Moto Perpetuo, Bach didn't use any of those forms for his cello suites. But you should notice that there are 6 movements, right? 6 movements, just like in Bach. So there is this kind of an acknowledgement of Bach, acknowledgement of him, but also saying, well, no, I won't follow you there. Music is demanding. It demands as much effort from the listener as the other 2 corners of the triangle. The holy triangle of the composer, the performer, and the listener. And we are very, extremely lucky tonight to have all 3 sides of the triangle with us. So now, let the music happen here together.